we go to a 100-meter race strategy. And so this basically sets up the phases of what a traditional 100-meter race plan is. And so the young lady in the middle, she is my short hurdler and 100-meter sprinter. And to her left is my true 100-meter, 200-meter sprinter. And so two different type of athletes and two different types of strategies, right? But they're both running the 100. And so, but essentially a lot of things are the same. But right now, Maya, who's in the middle, she's running a 100-meter race. So her first phase is drive. That's 8 to 10 steps. And you got to really, I teach them to really push, push, push. 10 steps, they got to generate max power to get the car moving. And then from there is that acceleration. And so that's kind of between that, if we're looking at meters, probably at the 15-meter mark to the 17-meter mark. It's a small transition window where they start raising their hips forward. And that's the acceleration where it says at this point, the most important and most often difficult thing is the timing. And it's running too soon versus too late. And what I mean by that is if you're running a 60, then your drive to acceleration to sprint is a short 35 to 40-meter window. And that transition from drive to acceleration is only about 4 or 5 steps. And if you miss it, then now you're playing catch up and the race is over. Noah Lyles, we all know him. He's a sprinter that he struggled with that indoors. He has a very good closing latter half of his race, which means that he transitions his drive to acceleration a little bit longer than most shorter sprinters. And so he has to learn how to kind of shift through those gears a little bit quicker. And it's the same thing here. So just teaching your athletes, just give them cones for ranges so they kind of know this is where I need to be kind of moving faster. And then going to our next slide on this 100-meter race strategy, it says now your top end. So you go from your drive phase to your acceleration to your top end. It says this is the part of the race that can only be held for up to 20 meters. Best speed, power, and technique determines efficiency. So what I like to say here is that Usain Bolt and I think Kristen Coleman are one of the two that kind of have been able to hold their top end speed the longest, which is somewhere around 20 meters. And what that means is when you accelerate to your fastest speed, they were only able to hold it for 20 more meters, right? So that means the average sprinter person is somewhere around 10 to 15 meters. And so with that being said, after you go 10 to 15 meters, you're doing what? Slowing down. And so if I'm running 100 meters and I drive, accelerate, and I get to my top end speed in 40 meters, I got 60 more meters that I'm really slowing down. So that's why really having a good drive phase, a good acceleration phase, going into your top end is important because like we have here on the slide, that deceleration stage where you got to hold your form, don't tense up. It's important because like anybody, everybody's slowing down. It's just a matter of who is holding their speed to not slow down as much. And so especially on those tech days as coaches, we want to make sure that we can identify each phase that our athletes working on and get them to really rehearse it. Now, if you're high school, that's a little harder to do because it's very specialized on the collegiate level, but still, I think you can do it. You just have to, be in more general terms with, hey, this 20 kids, we're going to work on our drive phase from cone to cone here. Then we're going to work on this. So it's the same thing. You just got bigger numbers. All right, going to our next slide. We have our 110 and 100 hurdle race strategy. And so Peter here in the picture, he was my 100 meter 10, then he went 10, 35, 36. And then he came back and went 13, I should know this, but 13:30, or excuse me, 13:06, somewhere in there. And so indoors, he went 7:77 and 6:67. And so a true 100, 110 hurdler / 60-meter sprinter / 60-meter hurdler. And so for him, he's very powerful, right? And so the starts, if you're looking at, for him, we really focused on his hurdle part because he was already a good sprinter. And so right here we have starts to the first hurdle. You want to use power, you want to use speed to set up steps to go through acceleration, right? And so from hurdles 1 through 3, that's where your hurdler is trying to establish their rhythm. I tell them any mistake you're going to make, whether it's clipping the first hurdle, not driving out the right way, keeping your hips too low in the hurdles, get all of that out the way by hurdles 1 through 3, right? And I think we talked about this in my previous session, understanding the phases. This phase 1 through 3 is important because it sets up your race. If you mess up 1 through 3, chances are it's going to predict a not so good race at the end of it. So you only got 1 to 3 hurdles to get it right. And that's the same way in the 100 meters. You got 30 meters to get it right. And so you're making sure at these times of practice, they're really locked into focusing on their lane and really getting all the kinks out with hurdles 1 through 3. All right, going to our next slide, we have strategy continued. The next phase or next part of the hurdle part of a race strategy is hurdles 3 through 5. And this is your transition hurdles. So I put here it's the most important part of the race because it basically is the meat and potatoes of your race. You see a lot of races where things fall apart between that 3rd hurdle and that 5th hurdle. In the 100 meters, you see a lot of things fall apart between that 30 meters and that 50 meters, right? So this is where for hurdles, you got to go. After you hit that 3rd hurdle, I teach them like we're moving. We're really staying high and tight because as you start coming up to speed, they're moving faster. And if they're a really good 100-meter or short sprinter, their speed is even faster. And so they want to make sure, and I want to make sure I teach them, got to stay tight and stay up under you, where at this part in a 100 race, they will start to be tall and opening up. So it's very much a switch that they have to constantly turn off so they don't really overlap the switches in the wrong race. And so looking at hurdles number 7 through 10, this is where you got to just be tight with form, to where the drills that we do, I make sure we don't do as many drills, but we do make sure the drills stay clean and tight, because I know once that flat speed starts coming over to the hurdle speed, it's like holding a car going full speed at 90 plus miles per hour. You got to keep it straight down the road. It's very difficult to do if your form is not really good and sound. And so, like it says at the end of that, as the speed increases, the hurdles will come up faster. And I'll say this, I like to cheat my hurdles in. So discounted, my first hurdle is always for the short hurdles. The long hurdles, I don't cheat in, but the first hurdles, for the short hurdles, first hurdle is on the mark, and then hurdles number 2 through 10, I go a half a foot. So hurdle number 2 is a half a foot, hurdle number 3 is a foot, hurdle number 4 is a foot and a half, and so forth. And the reason why is because I want my athletes to really get used to running with discounted hurdles so they can get down faster, right? Now, if your hurdle's not necessarily strong enough, cheat them in a little bit more so they can get comfortable with the 3 steps, but let them know that if you have them cheated in and they're still barely getting to the hurdle, let them know, hey, these hurdles are cheated in, and on race day, they're going to be at the actual mark. So you got to really push off that trail leg to make sure you get to the next hurdle. So I'm always a fan of discounted hurdles on practice, but when we get to the meet, none of their hurdles are discounted. Now it's time for them to really run at the true spacing. And then the finish, basically finish the race. You can win it or lose it here. So sprint off the last hurdle. So many times hurdlers go off the last hurdle and they kind of just go through the finish line. No, when you land off that last hurdle, your job is to jump off the last hurdle and really attack the finish line, because that's where people get outleaned or they just lose races, lose time because they didn't run through the line. And it was a thing a while back before, just in case, I know everybody on here is knowledgeable, but don't let your athletes dive or jump to the finish line. It does not work like that. True timing systems measure the time off of your torso or the front part of your chest. So when you're going vertical like this, your chest is to the ground. It doesn't help you. And tell them not to throw their hand out there, because none of that is going to stop the clock. Lean with your chest forward, or if I'm facing this way, chest forward this way. So that will stop the clock.